Hey, Shogi fans. This is just going to be a quick video going over the process of creating the most popular castles in Shogi. Castles, if you don't know, are what we call the defensive formations around the king, usually built up from some arrangement of gold, silvers, knights, and lances. You might not always get to create your castle in the most ideal method possible because you should be reacting dynamically to how your opponent is playing, but hopefully this gives you an idea of how to get started. Let's get started with Yagura, which is the most popular static rook castle. The key point you should know is that your general should be moving diagonal to get to their positions. So, to get started, you'll open your bishop diagonal, defend the bishop's head with your gold, and you'll move your silver up here and to here. Technically, this shape right here is Yagura, so the castle is technically done here, but we've got a bit more to do. Usually you will push these pawns as well at some point and move this gold up here. The king will move sideways, and then you have to get your bishop out of the way. The bishop can go to either 6-8 or 4-6, depending on how you want to attack. And then the king can move into his hole like this. There is another way if you feel like your opponent gives you the time. It's called rapid castling. You will get set up like this. And instead of moving your gold to 7-8, you're going to move your bishop right now. And you can actually save a move by moving your king in like this. And then you're done. And the move is saved because you didn't have to get the bishop out of the way. Your opponent's not always going to let you do this, but it is something to keep in mind if your opponent is playing slow. Aside from Yagura, there is also this almost half-finished Yagura called Crab Castle, which I think is actually a pretty solid castle for beginners who are still learning the ropes for how to play Shogi. And from this position, you could even go into this shape, which is called Gangi, or Snow Roof. And one more thing I'd like to talk about is in the bishop exchange opening when both players have a bishop in their hand. When you make your Yagura, normally you want to defend your whole camp against bishop drops. So instead of moving the king into here and moving your gold up, you will often simply move your gold up to here. And at some point, something like this, with your rook down, your gold here defending, and your king not going into the same hole as Yagura, just so that there's defense against gold drops in your whole camp. Now, moving on to swinging rook castles. Swinging rook is, of course, characterized by getting the rook out of the way, either to 6-8, 7-8, even 8-8, or the central file, which is central rook. So in this case, it doesn't really matter because we're talking about castles right now. So the first thing you have to do is get your rook out of the way. You will bring your king up into 2-8. Silver goes up. Left gold goes up like this, and this shape is called Mino Castle. This is a very strong castle to the side and is good against static rook. You will often also want to push this edge pawn just to give the king room to escape in endgame situations. Mino is also a dynamic castle, which allows you to expand on it further if your opponent allows you to. Like if they're playing a slow game or they're choosing not to attack, then you can reinforce your castle to make it even stronger. In this case, you can push the fourth and third file pawns, which allows you to bring the gold up, knight up, which adds thickness to the front. This is called High Mino Castle. And expanding on it even further, you can push this pawn forward to bring the silver up and the gold up, and this shape is called Silver Crown. One thing to keep in mind with Silver Crown is that this position where the silver has gone up and before the gold has is a very dangerous position because your gold is now floating, and your opponent will definitely try to make an attack in this position before you have a chance to finish strengthening your castle. And now looking at the hardest castle in Shogi, let's get the rook out of the way again. You will start it the same way that you started Mino Castle, but now your lance will come up, and the king will go to where the lance was. You close what's called the silver hatch. The gold comes in, and the other gold comes in. This castle is called Anaguma, or Bear in the Hole. It's the hardest castle in Shogi because in this position, there is absolutely nothing your opponent can do to check your king, which means that even in very violent endgame situations, if you can get even one tempo ahead of your opponent, then you will be at an advantage. The downside to Anaguma, of course, is that, as you can see, the king is tucked very deep into the corner of the board. So if it's attacked, there's a very low chance that the king will be able to escape. So you're basically trading the ability to run away from situations for extra toughness. And now we've got just one more castle I want to look at for swinging rook. You, of course, get your rook out of the way. And if your opponent also plays swinging rook, we have a castle called Peerless Golds. You'll move your king to 3-8. Your golds will come up. These are the aforementioned Peerless Golds, sometimes called twin golds. And then the silver will come up to 2-8. This structure is called a silver wall, which is typically bad for defense because your king won't be able to get into here. But it's actually a feature in this castle, not only because the silver defends the king's bottom, but also because in double swinging rook, there's usually going to be an edge attack anyway. So it's actually not so bad because the king usually doesn't want to run this way anyway. You can also play a lot of castles mirrored, by which I mean that both static rook and swinging rook can play them. So just as an example, swinging rook is able to play right side Yagura like this. This is strong against double swinging rook. And static rook has access to Mino Castle as well. They can also play with the king up here, which dodges the bishop diagonal. And you can even play Silver Crown on the left side. And yes, of course, static rook also has access to Anaguma. And it's actually thought that static rook Anaguma makes it very, very hard for swinging rook, and many professionals basically stopped playing swinging rook because of this castle. Now we're almost done. There's just a couple of static rook castles I want to look at that are used against swinging rook. Bringing the king up here. And the gold here, this is called Boat Castle. You can see it's kind of shaped like a boat. And then from here, you can move the right silver in. This is called Hakoiri Musume, or Girl in the House. There's also this shape called Elmo, which is named after the Shogi engine Elmo. And finally, one of the hardest castles, aside from Anaguma, for static rook versus swinging rook is called Millennium. You can start it with the boat castle, and then move your bishop and your knight out of the way, and the king will castle to 8-9. Notably, it dodges the bishop diagonal. The silver comes up here, and the gold's here. And actually, there's another build order that's slightly safer. You can move your bishop to 7-7 and prepare the castle this way. king comes down to here, and the gold comes up. Silver gets out of the way to 6-8, and then you finish the castle. This is slightly slower, but it prevents your bishop from coming under attack on the 6-6 square. Oh, and before we finish, there's one last thing I want to mention. In central rook opening, you'll often castle into Mino castle, but as you can see, the rook is actually in the way of where the gold usually goes in Mino castle. So oftentimes the gold will either stay here or come to defend on the 7-8 square. And that'll do it for the most popular castles. There are many more possible castles than what I've shown, but hopefully by looking at the move orders, you'll have some ideas for how to implement them into your games. Remember, on top of fortifying your castle, you should also be balancing your attacking and defending moves. So if you spend your entire opening speed running into your castle, your opponent may have the opportunity to just completely forego defense and just set up a fast strategy to tear down your castle without any fear of a counterattack. That'll do it for us today. I'll be back soon with another one. If you have any questions about castling, make sure to leave them in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more Shogi videos. I'm Rico with Shogi House, and I'll see you all next time.